So the Mississippi being the Nile is a topic that comes up quite a bit. I have addressed this in other videos, but I figured I'd just touch on it again. So there are a lot of people that seem to think the Mississippi could be the Nile, and that is a thought that seems to be passed around on the internet quite a bit lately. And I can understand why, because on the surface it does make a lot of sense. Memphis, Cairo, all the Egyptian names. There's also been Egyptian findings and mummies and tombs and stuff found in that area. So I am not saying that maybe at some point in history wasn't part of Egypt. It seems like it possibly was. Either Egypt relocated or possibly extended that far east, or a similar culture to the Egyptians lived there. However, with my research, it has become very, very clear that regardless of any of that, that is not the Egypt or the area of Egypt being referenced in most of the Bible stories. For example, the Exodus, and also when Jesus and Mary Joseph went to Egypt, all those things. And it's also very clear that the Mississippi could not be the Nile. And there's two main reasons for that. One is linguistics, and other is just location. So let's talk about linguistics first. So in the Bible, the Euphrates is often referred to as the river or the Great River. I do think the Mississippi is the Euphrates. The word Euphrates is also a male word, and I don't know if everyone's aware of this, but the Mississippi is called Big River, Big Muddy, and Old Man River. That's how people reference the Mississippi today, or at least in the 1800s. That was very common. There's musicals, there's songs, there's movies, all about this. I grew up along the Mississippi, so I'm pretty familiar with Mississippi lore. It's Big Muddy, Old Man River. Linguistically, that sounds a lot like what is used in the Bible to reference Euphrates. The Nile, on the other hand, is not actually a river in the Bible. There is not a river in the Bible or in Scripture called the Nile or Nile. Rather, the word Nile is a generic term used for a tributary, stream, brook, river. It is not a proper name, as opposed to Euphrates, which is a proper name used in the Bible. The rivers in Egypt referenced in the Bible and talked about in the Bible, they are all, the words used for those bodies of water are Yam Suf, Shihor, the river of Egypt. It is never called Nile. So, well, people online like to pass around memes and stuff comparing the Nile River in the Middle East to the Mississippi and how they look similar. I don't know how. They're not comparing the right things, if that makes sense. Because the Nile over there was named the Nile, but it is not what the Bible talks about. Okay, so I'm sure that was clear as mud, but hopefully you get my point. Location-wise, when you really start putting together these scriptures and these different Bible stories that took place between, Judea and Egypt and everything in between, it becomes very, very clear that it's much more regional than that. The Mississippi would be much too far away. So I suppose you could up and move everything over to the Mississippi, but there's some really big problems with that because you have to have a lot of these landmarks and structures that are in Utah, right? For example, the Great Salt Lake and the Jordan River and the Sea of Galilee or Utah Lake. I mean, there's a lot of land and detailed descriptions of the land that absolutely 100% would not fit anywhere else except in Utah. There is no other salt sea anywhere. To the best of my knowledge, there are actually only 3 inland salt seas in the entire world. And one is in the Middle East and the other is in Utah. And then there's also one, I believe, in Peru. And these are inland salt seas or bodies of water that are connected to a freshwater body of water that by a river. And so, there's not that does not exist in Illinois or in Tennessee or in Ohio or anywhere like that. So when you take something like that, and then compare it to these stories, for example, there's a lot of references to places like Bethlehem and Hebron and Gaza and city of David, Valley of the Giants, all of these places that are in the southern part of Judea and bordering Egypt. And there are stories that reference travel between these places and kind of how long it took. There's one specifically, some of David's men, he was battling it out with some bad guys, and near the border of Egypt, and they went and got him water from Bethlehem because he wanted water from his hometown. I don't know why, but he did. And it took them 2 days to do that. They could not have gone from Judea to the Mississippi and back in 2 days. So there's just lots of little details that start to tie this together and make it very clear that the Nile could not be the Mississippi. It is not in the right location, and it does not fit, and it does not remotely fit when you really start mapping this out in great detail. But yes, I do agree that there is evidence of Egyptian culture along the Mississippi, and I don't deny that. The Bible also says, however, that Memphis was be destroyed. Memphis was destroyed, and so I tend to think that if the Mississippi, I'm sorry, if Memphis, Tennessee was an Egyptian location, it was more likely like where they relocated to after the original Memphis was destroyed. So maybe it's Memphis 2.0. I really don't know. Or maybe Egypt just grew so much that they extended all the way there. Also, the other thing is, along that part of the Mississippi, part of that was the land of Cush. Cush was the brother of the guy who got Egypt. What's his name? Starts with an M. So, I mean, the cultures could have been very similar. There's a ton in Colorado, and down through along to the Mississippi. So, it does look very Egyptian-ish, but that doesn't necessarily mean it was Egypt proper. It could have been Cush, the land of Cush, or something similar. But that's just what I know so far, what I've figured out so far. But I do know that it absolutely could not be the Nile going off of scripture. The Nile, quote unquote, the Nile, what we think of as the Nile, would be more like the Colorado and other tributaries of the Colorado that run down along there and kind of near the Grand Canyon area. Okay, this whole thing was just me rambling. It was probably clear as mud, but just felt like talking about it. So let me know if anyone has questions. I can try to clarify a little bit. Another real quick point I thought of. There's a lot of talk about them going up and down the Euphrates, from Egypt area to Assyria, and Assyria was north, Egypt was south. So that tells you the Euphrates ran north and south, not east and west. So that's just another detail I thought of to share. Okay, that was really long and rambly. Hope it made a little sense.